really nice to be amongst friends and brothers. It's really important that we get together at these times and just share what went on, what happened, and that's what I try to do with both of my books. Let me first of all introduce myself, let you know who I am. As Peggy said, I'm Ken Byerly. I grew up in New York. I went to college at Pennsylvania Military College. Left Pennsylvania Military College, served in Germany and Vietnam. After that, I got out and spent 40 years in the pharmaceutical industry and have lived here in Ocean City for the last over 30 years. And thank God the drive was not like it was today, right? That was unbelievable, the big traffic. Well, we're here today to talk about an area we all know. And since, except for Kevin, we are all Vietnam veterans, and a lot of you know T from Barnegat. She is an immigrant from Vietnam. She's about 53 years old. She runs an organization called Thanking Vietnam Veterans. She is amazing. She puts on March 29th, National Vietnam Veterans Day, she puts on a show that is amazing. And I've been there every year but one in the past 5. She's a great lady. But she also gives me these pins, and I want to give it out to each one of you guys. Welcome home. Wear it with pride. Dan?
Thank you. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Whoop. Welcome home.
Yes.
I think you've got one. You sure? Okay. But one thing I want to say, one thing is important with those pins, wear it with pride. I think that's really, really important. Dan Pavisi and I were talking last time I was here, and the key word that Dan used as I was talking to him and as we finished our conversation was welcome home. And that's really, really important. Before I get into the books, I want to just share with you this poster, which was given to me by the National Vietnam War Museum, which is based outside of Dallas, Texas. And the reason why I show it, the reason why I leave it is because a lot of the misconceptions about the war most of them are corrected right here with data and documents. For example, most of the people in the war were draftees. That's not true. Second, most of the 58,281 names on the wall were mostly draftees. That's not true. The other is that the amount of education each Vietnam veteran had was not very good. Well, again, this clarifies it. 79% of the Vietnam veterans in Vietnam had a high school degree or greater. One. That compares to 63% for the Korean War and 45% for World War II. So a lot of the misconceptions this board really, really clarifies. We all know about where we were and what we're doing. I Corps, 2 Corps, 3 Corps, and 4 Corps. On the north was China. On the west was Laos and Cambodia. On the south, on the east and in the south was the China Sea. So you have where the units were, and this isn't really as accurate. They must have taken a time when the units were moving around, because when I was in Phu, which is right there at the tip of that arrow, we supported the 101st Airborne across the street, the 1st and 2nd Divisions, and you don't see them listed over here. But it gives you a representation of what some of the units who were there at one time. Okay? Any questions? I'm gonna make this a participatory. Ask some questions, all right? First question I'm gonna ask. Oh, Bill?
Well, the question is, there were so many units, and I was going to speak to this later. The politicians were running the war. They were just moving them around like chess pieces.
Yeah.
And I know that in the Marine Corps, where I was in, kind of July was the southern
Yep.
base. They just kept moving them up closer to the DMZ,
Mm-hmm.
which they were just throwing Marines at the situation and not thinking to think ahead.
I agree. For example, as I said, when here in Fubai, where I was, the 1st and 2nd Divisions of Camp Eagle and Camp Evans were the 101st. When I got to Vietnam, we were up here in Quan Tri City, and what we were doing was clearing out the 81st, the Big Red One, excuse me, who are now being moved to another location. So, Bill, you probably are right.
Yeah. To give an example, where I was stationed, the 1st Marine Division, that eventually the 3rd Marine Division took over as the 1st moved up. Then they gave it to the Arvins, and it was overrun.
Yeah, that's
Overrun.
good reason why.
It would never have been overrun when
Nope.
either division was there.
A lot of my friends who acted as advisors to the Arvin, they were sick, because as it became Vietnamese or Vietnamese eyes, whatever the word is to using that, turning it over to the Vietnam, they would go out and they would go behind, for example, a bunch of grunts, Arvin grunts, and he would be there as the military advisor. And he said they were fine when they were training. Then as soon as they got into a fight with either NVA or VC, they would go like this, turn around, and they're all running the other direction. So I totally agree with you that it would be a lot different if we would have kept our people there. Yes.
I guess the only comment I had about the initial thing was the fact that it's listed that most of the people were not drafted. I wasn't drafted because I joined the Navy thinking I was trying to do anything I could do except go to Canada and stay out of Vietnam. So I'm sure there was more than just me that did that.
I'll tell you a real quick funny story. When I came back from Vietnam, we came into Seattle, and a guy came with me. His name was Bill Bobko. He was a captain. He was our S3 officer, operations officer. We were getting off in Seattle, and that's where he lived. It was in Seattle. So, and he was a big man. And we went, those days you can go up to where the plane came in, you can sit around, you can talk and do that. Well, we're sitting there chatting, we're in khakis, it's February, we're probably freezing to death if you remember correctly. And all of a sudden I look down right behind Bill and I see this big hippie, huge guy with a beard, and long hair, and a ban the bomb thing around his chest, and I'm getting real nervous because he's coming right towards us. And I go, Bill, behind you. I said, there's a hippie coming. He jumps up and he makes a face, goes up, and they start hugging each other, right? It's his twin brother.
No kidding.
His twin brother went to Canada. He wanted to go into service, so he went up to Canada. So he hated Canada. He came back, but what he had to do was he had to do his community service. But if I would have had my camera like I had today, I would have made $1 million. I mean, they're one of the most unbelievable pictures I ever seen in my life. But anyway, yeah. All right, first book, Welcome Home. Again, something I said to Dan when as I was leaving, the last thing he yelled to me was, welcome home. And I can't say and express how much that means when I hear somebody say to me, welcome home, or thank you for your service. It means a lot. And the lucky ones. The reason why I said that is because I've tried writing this book 3 times. And the first time and the second time, 2 guys, each group, said they couldn't do it. They couldn't talk about it. They didn't want to remind themselves of what happened when they were in Vietnam. And so I had to lock it out. But the lucky ones came from a bunch of us, like we're doing here, sitting around talking. And one guy looked and he goes, I got to tell you something. He said, the 58,281 that are on the wall, and he said some of them came back wounded, and you know, the ones who did come back, maybe came back wounded. He goes, we're the lucky ones. And I said, God, that's a perfect way to say welcome home to the lucky ones. It involves, yeah, Dan.
I changed lucky to blessed.
Yeah, you
We're
can
the
do that.
blessed.
Yeah, if that works, you're absolutely right.
Lucky don't work for me.
Yeah. The book's about 4 Vietnam veterans. Myself, another young man with the 23rd Infantry Division. His name was John Laughlin. John was right there in Tam Key. And then the other one wasn't in country. He was over it. He was in the Air Force. And the other one was 82nd Airborne down here in the Iron Triangle around Saigon. So what this book goes into is what happened before they went in the service, what happened when they went in the service and in country, and then what happened when they got home. We all know, most of us know, what happened when we got home. We weren't welcome. It was like, almost like you were, my friend says, invisible, which I think is a very, very good idea of what happened when they saw you and they didn't want to even get near you, touch or talk to you. But we talked about what happened. For example, as I said before, I was with the 26th General Support Group that supported the 101st Airborne. We had a great unit. We had great people. With the 101st was truly unique because of the organization that they are. The soldiers they had were unbelievable. But we really, really learned that we had to work together in order to survive, in order to get to what we needed to get. The other one was John Laughlin. John Laughlin went to Rider College. He's from Philadelphia. He went to Rider College. And he went to Rider for a semester. And then he decided to take a semester off. Bad thing to do in 1960s, 1970s. He got drafted within 2 weeks. And when he got drafted, he went ahead and went through his whole draft process. He went ahead and they sent him to Fort Hood. Went to Fort Hood. His MOS was an 11 Echo, armored vehicle crewman. When he was finished his training in Fort Hood, they decided, nah, that's not needed. We don't need them in Vietnam. You're going to be an 11 Bravo. And I looked and he goes, he didn't even know what an 11 Bravo was at that time. So he finally found out very, very quickly and then was sent to Vietnam. The guy I told you wasn't in country, he's above it. His name was Mike Moran. Mike was also from Philadelphia. Mike got drafted. He graduated from LaSalle College, graduated and got drafted. He said, I'm not going to let them decide where I go. I'm going to do it myself. So he went into Philadelphia, took all the tests for the services except the Marine Corps. And I said, why did you take the Marine Corps? He said, they're a bunch of sick puppies. And I said, well, yeah, it's a good way to describe them, but you know, I understand. And he got into the Air Force. You know what he did? He was a bombardier navigator aboard a B-52. Flew out of Utapao, Thailand, and Guam. His stories in here, they're just amazing. The other person is a guy I went to college with, I've known for 64 years. His name is Steve Rejo. Steve, when I was a senior, he was our brigade commander. He was the #1 cadet in the entire Corps. When he graduated, this full bull colonel, I saw a lieutenant, oh, there it is. But I saw a full bull colonel. He said a full bull colonel walked up to him, and we were talking, and he saluted him. He saluted him back, and he goes, he says, okay, let's go, Lieutenant. And he goes, what do you mean, let's go? He said, but you're in the service. He goes, no, sir. He says, I just graduated. He says, can I have some time off? He says, all right, you got 3 days off, and then you're in the service. And that's what happened to him. He went to Vietnam, went to the 82nd Airborne, located in the Iron Triangle, and he was a platoon leader, a grunt. He was just a great leader. Let me tell you a real quick story about him. I shared it with some of you earlier. one of the reasons why we wrote this book is for number one, for our families, so that we could talk to them, maybe through writing, about what happened. Second thing is we wanted Vietnam veterans who don't talk and are keeping everything inside to really open up and share it. That's the best thing they can do. Steve and I were at my 50th reunion for graduating college. He tapped me on the shoulder and he said, "Can I talk to you a minute?" I said, "Sure." I walked over to him because I was talking to him about possibly contributing to write on the book. And I said, what's up? He goes, "I'm going to tell you something I've told one person in 50 years. And I went, "One person?" I said, "In all that time?" He said, "One person." He went on for half an hour, described an unbelievable story. And when it was all over, he looked at me, he pointed at me, and he said, "Now you got to make a promise." And I said, "What's that?" He said, "I don't want you to repeat this to anybody." I said, "You've told 2 people in 50 years, and you don't want to talk about it." He says, "No." And he said, "You know why? Because somebody who's not a Vietnam veteran wouldn't understand what it's all about." So he kept it all inside, and that was sad. That was truly sad. But anyway, so those are the guys who are in the book, and they talk about what happened to them. They talk about their units. They talk about the people they served with. It's some great stories. Now, thing about coming home is that we talked about the name of the book, Welcome Home, is because us never got that. You know, you're almost like you were taboo. You were in the military. It didn't matter where you served, especially if you're a Vietnam veteran. I don't want to talk to you about it. And it's really tough when you read and hear those stories and then actually experience it yourself. And when I came back, I had to do some interviews because I had a wife and a son, and I had to get a job. So I was interviewing with this man, and I had my years in service, my rank, the medals that I received, and he looked at me and he goes, "Can I give you a word of advice while you're doing this interview process?" I said, "Sure, what's that?" He said, "Take all your military service out." And I said, "Why?" I said, "It's going to leave a three-year gap in my resume." He said, "No, nobody wants to see that. Get it out." So I didn't listen to him. I left it in anyway because I had to come up several times more about that, which is really sad. The other thing too, and I really didn't know this until I was with my VVA chapter about 2 months ago. And we were talking, because when I came back from Vietnam, my job was my family first, getting a job second. I didn't join, as I am now, American Legion or the VVA. I just was out there to survive. The guys at the meeting with the VVA, there were 18 of us. 17 of them said that when they came home, which I didn't know this, they went to the American Legion and they went to the VFW and they were turned away. Is it right then? I never knew that, and I never heard that, and that's why one of the reasons why the VVA I really enjoy the VVA is because of their motto. You know, and then you can't abandon another group of veterans. Never again. You don't do it. So that again was part of the book. The other thing, as I said before, we deal with a lot of the misconceptions about the war, and we also there's a chapter in here about a friend of mine that I grew up with. He was killed in Vietnam. He received the Congressional Medal of Honor. His story is just amazing, and could not believe what happened, because when I was a junior, he was killed, and then when I came back from Vietnam, when I came back from Germany before I went to Vietnam, and I'll tell you about it in a minute, my big brother in my fraternity was also killed. So my mind started to change about what was going on with the war. Any questions about the book or anything? Yeah.
Just real quick, it's not a question, it's when I went to look for jobs, they were glad that it was on there because they knew I couldn't be drafted.
Ah,
Believe
yeah.
it or not, it worked the other way too.
Yeah, that's a good point. I never thought about it that way.
They didn't say anything one way or the other about what it was.
Yeah,
But it was, the fact that it was on there meant that I wouldn't be pulled out of that company.
gotcha.
Because there were very few places you went that you weren't that you were protected from the draft.
Correct, correct.
That was 70.
Yeah.
1970 when I was looking for jobs.
Yeah,
And
that's,
it was just a line item, you know.
Yep.
You know, the Navy, XYZ, and whatever I said on there. But it actually helped me because they didn't want somebody that could be drafted out of there.
that's a very good point. I never thought about that.
You know, there's two sides to all of that stuff.
Oh, yeah, amen. Bill?
Yeah, and I'll be the other side. Anybody here from Wildwood that grew up in Wildwood? Except me. I'm probably the one of the only locals in the area. We had a different situation in Wildwood. They wanted Vietnam veterans to join the VFW and the American Legion.
Really?
We had a recruiter that came around he came around the house like as I was emptying my sea bag with an application for the VFW and the American Legion. He says, I'll be back tomorrow. Give me, it was $10 each or $8 each. And, your one DD 214, make sure it's a copy. My thought was, how do I make a copy? And he was a Korean War vet, and we were welcomed into both the American Legion and the VFW wholeheartedly. So it was a different community too. It was small.
Yep.
We knew each other.
Yep.
I was telling a gentleman here in Wildwood High, we had 7 losses from Wildwood High, and that's when
Did you really?
That's when you graduate 100 kids in the class.
Wow,
So
that's a lot.
percentage-wise, that's a lot.
Oh, yeah.
7
Good Lord.
casualties. And many served. Matter of fact, I'm still finding out when I go to reunions and things of guys that served. That just some guys that served, like were in the Air Force or Navy that never got in country, don't feel like they're really part of it. You got to convince them that they were.
Absolutely, absolutely. And the Air Force guy that I had, Mike, when we sat down, we spent hours talking about, I'm totally negligent about learning anything about the Air Force or the Navy, either one. But
Your loss.
huh?
Your loss.
he just talked about some of the most fascinating things. And he always said, but Ken, I'm not a Vietnam veteran. I said, wait a minute. The first time in Linebacker 1, what did you do? I said, you supported ARVN and you supported American soldiers who were caught in different situations, and you were in South Vietnam. Linebacker 2, you were bombing Hanoi and Haiphong Harbor, and then what happened? Well, when our Linebacker 1, they only had little weapons, whatever they were using, AK-47s or whatever they were using. Then when he got to Hanoi and Haiphong Harbor, they were using SAMs. And those things are so huge that they were losing, they had lost literally almost none before. And after Linebacker 2, they were losing 2 or 3 every time they went out. So it really changed. There was a totally different atmosphere, total different time. Okay, anything else about Welcome Home? All right, good. Second book, Paid in Full. Guess what the title means?
He died.
They died, but what else?
Or you
When every one of you,
completed your service and moved on.
when every one of you went in the service, what did you do? You signed a blank check to Uncle Sam to be paid up to and including your life. Therefore, the title of the book, Paid in Full. This is about 8 guys that went to Pennsylvania Military College, and of the 8, I knew 5 of them. These are all fantastic young men. And when I was going through writing the first book, I couldn't find anything about any of them but PMC, or now Widener University, to try to find documentation about what their service was. What made me do that is I said, these guys need to be recognized because they should not be forgotten for what they did. So therefore, wrote the book. This book was basically written for their families and their classmates from PMC and their friends. Most importantly, of the widows that I dealt with, 4 widows and 1 daughter They were unbelievable. They were strong. They provided me with so much information and so much photographs, so much data. I couldn't have done this book without them. They were super, super women. As a matter of fact, I still keep in contact with all of them. Now, I'm going to give you a thumbnail sketch of all 8 of them so that you have an idea of what we're talking about. One of them I may get a little more detail. It's if Peggy doesn't yell at me for time-wise. All right. First of all, when they died, the average age was 24. 3 of them were dads before they left for Vietnam. One, Dan Monahan, was a Special Forces Green Beret. He was in a UH-1 on his way to a mission. When across the radio came a wire, and it was from the chaplain that his wife gave birth to a girl. Her name was Maureen, and they wanted him to know. Unfortunately, 8 days later, he was killed. And I'll tell you a story about that in a few minutes, which is really, 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 really something. Okay, now we had 2 pilots. One pilot I had mentioned before with the Sea Knight, we were talking in the back, from the 7th Fleet. The other was shot down in Vietnam. You know when you watch MASH, the beginning of the MASH, any MASH episode you see, that's an OH-13. That's the helicopter that he was shot down in. And I'll tell you a little bit more when we get it. When you take a look at the others, you had 4 infantry officers. We had 1 armor officer. We had 1, I want to say, well, I would say ordnance, but he was a great guy. His name was Bill Allen. That was my big brother when I had pledged fraternity. The other was in transportation, and that was my branch. And his name was Dave Wilson. He was also a fraternity brother of mine. Tell you about what happened when you looked at the 2 chopper pilots. We already talked about the one with the Marine Corps and the 7th Fleet. And going down, no body was recovered. The co-pilot's body was not recovered. The crewman's body was recovered. And they tried to get to the aircraft. It was in the Indian Ocean, but they couldn't do it because it was shark infested. So the family never knew what happened to him because it was a top secret mission. At that time, they were tracking Soviet submarines from the 7th Fleet and also watching them and also going up along the South Vietnam coast. But they couldn't tell his parents. They never knew, even after they passed away, they never knew what happened to their son. But I thought that was really tragic, really sad. Now, the other one, Bud Stevenson, also an infantry officer, flew the OH-13, and he was with a young 18-year-old observer when they got shot down, and I'll get into that in a minute. And he wasn't killed then. The 18-year-old was. He wasn't killed then. He died 4 days later. But I'll tell you the story behind that. Now, these guys, their stories were amazing. One of them, Dan Monahan, the one who was told he was a dad while he was in a chopper on the way to a mission, he was a Special Forces Green Beret. He had a book written about him called Mekong First Light. It was written by Joseph Galloway Jr. Joe actually served with him in Vietnam. And Dan was his CO, and also he tried to help train some of the lieutenants who came in. But what was extremely unique about the whole thing was that in the beginning of the book, and I never saw this in any book that I've read, Joe Galloway wrote a letter to his daughter Maureen. And his daughter Maureen was either 17 or 18 years old when he sent it to her, considering when Dan was killed in Vietnam and when the book was released. Absolutely amazing. It's a one-page letter, and I tell you, he talked about the man, the leader, the individual, the human being, the protector of his people. He goes down the litany because he wanted her to know about her father, because she never knew about him. And it's just an amazing story. Another story in the book was about a guy named Jack Gagan. Name is not familiar to you, understandable. Jack was our brigade commander a year before I got to Pennsylvania Military College. He was one of those people who are totally unique. And as a matter of fact, a couple of the guys described him as unique. He had a movie made about him. Some of you may have seen it. Some of you may have heard it. We Were Soldiers, starring Mel Gibson. Well, that's about Jack Gagan. If you look at it, Jack with his wife and his small child. The small child is the one I told you about the 4 widows and the daughter. I communicate with her, Cammie, all the time. She's 57 years old. And we had some unbelievable chats and discussions, and it was difficult for them to go through all that, but they made it because it was just, they wanted everybody to know about their dad and their fathers. Third one was the guy I told you about, Bud Stevenson, who got shot down on the OH-13, which is like a bubble, and it went upside down when it landed. When Bud was shot, he had 11 bullet holes from his waist to under his arm. 11 bullet holes. The 18-year-old next to him was dead. The story of how they tried to get him out was amazing. One guy, W4, Rex, his name is Rex Dula. Rex and his gunner, Bobby Pridmore, 18 years old. They were shot down and they were NVA coming in all directions, coming like crazy. He saw, after the helicopter inverted, Rex said, we got to go see if they're alive. So he flew over to them, and he saw an arm go up like this, and it was Bud. So with that, Bobby Pridmore goes over, matter of fact, you have one, grabs an M60, takes the ammunition bin, puts it between his leg, jumps off, gets next to the chopper. He was there for over an hour, protecting them from the NVA. Do you know why? Anybody? I didn't know why, but Rex told me. The NVA or the VC, doesn't matter, would offer bonuses to any NVA or VC who would bring back either a body or a wounded helicopter pilot. And when they did, they were mutilated, and then they were killed. He was there for over an hour. He had 3 bullets left from an M60 from a canister. They were dead NVA all over. They talked about, Rex said, trying to get him to get out. Rex finally got him, and by the time he did, he had 3 bullets left. 1 in a .45 and 2 in the M60. 1 for the kid he didn't know was dead, 1 for Bud, and then 1 for himself. Bud died 4 days later because of the wounds, the unbelievable wounds on his side, and also he got shot in another place which they would never describe where it was, but I'm assuming he had to be somewhere in the neck area. But, you know, he died 4 days later. But an unbelievable story. Bobby Pridmore, the 18-year-old who stayed with him for an hour, got the Silver Star. Rex and some of the other people put him in for a Medal of Honor. When he when I was writing the book, I said to Rex, did you get any feedback on the Medal of Honor? And this is what Rex was told. He said, sorry, that's too old. We can't recognize it. And I said to Rex, I said, how do you recognize bravery? You know, there's no time limit on bravery or heroism. I said, that's terrible. He said, Ken, they dropped the paperwork. But here you, and the bigger problem than that is that Bobby is now, has dementia. He wouldn't know if he got it anyway. When I talked to him, his wife, I could barely understand her. She was from the back hills of Tennessee and Kentucky and Alabama. And she said, you can't talk to Bobby. And I said, well, why not? He said, I don't know how you say it. And then she said, he suffers from dementia. And I went, oh my God, even if he got the Medal of Honor, he'd never know, which is sad. Any questions? Any thoughts? Yes, Bill.
They have corrected that a little bit
Yep.
with the Medal of Honor
Yep.
for ethnic, religion, and other kind of reasons, and even just skipping the time frame. I'm actually working with on two. One's a Navy Cross and one's a Silver Star recipient to upgrade them to Medal of Honor through Senator Booker's office. We've been working for some time. I'm not optimistic right now, but they both jumped on grenades and died. We were told in boot camp that's happened, but you know why they didn't get it? Both were black.
You're kidding.
And I've been a
Wow.
number of identical situations of white guys doing
Yep.
it. Some even lived and got the Medal of Honor. These two. And why I was looking at them, they're both from New Jersey. One from Newark and one from Bridgeton.
Really? That's terrible. Hey, for example, the reason why I got the book is because, as I told you about Steve Karopsik, who got the Medal of Honor, he did exactly what they did. He was wounded first. He got shot in the chest. He put his finger in the bullet hole. Went on and led all his men to go ahead and forward the attack, and then pull back. And then while they were sitting, and he was getting with a medic, getting it attended, there were two wounded GIs, two of his men, and a hand grenade came lobbing in, landed in. He jumped up, put his helmet on it, and of course he was killed. When I went to his funeral, his mother, who was probably one of the prettiest, most intelligent women I've ever met, when I talked to her, she had just finished seeing what was left of Steve, which was in a body bag about yay big, and she was gone. She had lost it, and sad because both when he got the Medal of Honor, she couldn't comprehend what it was, which was sad. Anything else? Anybody else? No questions? Oh my Lord. I'm shocked. I have one other thing I didn't put in the book. Thought I'd share with you, since we're all brothers except for Kevin, and Kevin's helping us out here at the museum. Any of you guys have a premonition about your service in Vietnam? You wouldn't be coming back?
No, not in my case.
Okay.
I
Dan?
thought about, they have trips there, and I talked to other veterans who went there and came back, and they insist, go there, you gotta go back. And
Yep.
I'm like, I don't wanna go back.
Yeah, I agree. Did you?
No.
I didn't either. So when I started talking to the widows, 4 of them, half of them, had premonitions, which I never even knew existed. One, Bob Chinquina, he was with the 11th Armored Cavalry, or what they call the Black Horses. He was a tank commander. He was a senior at Pennsylvania Military College, and he was in the room, and he's got a piece of paper, and he's writing things on a piece of paper, and he's got a big plastic bag. And his roommate, Doug Haywood, in the room, Doug, his name will come up in a minute or two, which is really eerie. And Doug said to him, "What are you doing?" He says, "Oh, just in case I don't come back to Vietnam, take all my stuff, put it in this plastic bag and send it to this address." And Doug was an infantry officer. When Bob was killed in Vietnam, Doug was not even a click away. And he couldn't do anything about it. That was his best friend. He couldn't do anything about it. And that was shocking. Jack Gagan, the guy I just talked about who made the movie about, he was the only child. He spoke to his dad after taking care, told him that he's going to take care of his family if he's in Vietnam and doesn't come back. His widow, Barbara, who only died like 2 years ago, great lady, she didn't know anything about it. Jack's father came up and told her when he made him promise. And Jack's dad said to her, he said, "I have a bad feeling about this." And unfortunately, it came true. He was with the 1st Cav Division of the 7th Cavalry. Another one, Dennis Isom, who's also in the book. Dennis was a senior at PMC talking with Bill Samolin, who was now he's a retired full-bold colonel in the Marine Corps. At that time, he was a brigade commander. And he said to him, he says, "Look," he said, "if I go to Vietnam, I'm going to come back, either I won't come back or I'll come back a hero." And Bill said to him, you know, "What are you talking about?" He says, "I just had that feeling." And that's kind of eerie because when I talked to Colonel Samolin, he literally started crying when he started telling me about what had happened and what he described what that Dennis had told him. Bud Stevenson, the guy with the OH-13 who was killed. His widow, Carol, her name now is Carol DeBunda. She found out from her father that when her father took Bud to the airport to go to Vietnam, he made her father promise that he would take care of the kid, his one son, and Carol, if he didn't come back. 1st Cav, 9th Cavalry Division. He did not come back. So kind of eerie. I didn't put it in the book because I couldn't get a hold of all the widows to get the actual information. Any other questions about the book at all or anything we talked about?
I guess I just want to make a comment
Go ahead.
about the museum because, and the fact that for me, it was hard to talk about.
Yep.
And I didn't talk about it for years and years. Volunteering here has helped me because it made me talk about people that came in to see the museum. And, and I witnessed a lot of individuals, Vietnam veterans that either hesitate to come in or won't come in, or when they do, they feel better about it.
I totally agree with you. Like I said, of the 4 guys that decided to pull out, one of them was a very good friend of mine. And I said to him, "You got to talk about it." I said, "And even if you just talk about it with us, with a bunch of other Vietnam veterans, you got to talk about what happened. Because if you don't, you're going to carry it, and one day it may unfortunately go the wrong way." But I agree with you. There's quite a few who won't talk about it at all. And it's sad because I really helped them out. My roommate in college, Rick Clark, Rick suffered from PTSD for, I think it was about 45 years. And he finally got some help. He finally went ahead and started talking, went to where he lives down in Virginia. They had like focus groups and meeting groups. He totally changed, went back, went to the VA, did all the paperwork, and got 100% disability retroactive.
Wow, lucky man.
Yeah, and he was a grunt. He was a grunt officer with the 82nd Airborne. Anything else? Anybody else?
Are you getting ready to close?
Go ahead.
I want to thank you for writing the book about yourself and
the other gentleman. I think it's, I do a lot of reading historically, and I've been reading a lot of biographies or autobiographies, not just of Vietnam soldiers, but other figures. I think it's important. I want to thank you for writing that book, because we need to hear these stories in different lives. And even that, if we're in a firefight 3 feet away, it's no different than a football line. What he sees is
Yep.
not exactly what I see.
Exactly.
So if he's a tackle, he's seeing a guard, maybe and a center. I'm seeing something different, generally, and it puts in perspective, because what you're writing about, unlike the big bestsellers, are politicians or generals who are designing these wars. You're doing the everyday chores and duties and things like that occupy a lot of the time when you're not in a fight. The boring stuff, and you talk about the families and things like that. And I think it's important to have it at your level, at our level, the actual working, because that's where the real decisions are made. I say it now. When you hear about all these situations, it's a $10 an hour employee who caused that situation, who were involved in it. It wasn't the senior people or whatever. Although it's important to read about them too. And I will say about high schools, I mentioned earlier, I think I'm just lucky from being a while at high school. The curriculum in the high school history gives as much time to Vietnam as it does to any other war.
You're fortunate.
And we have a replica of the wall just 2 blocks away from the high school. And Dan will tell you, every Veterans Day or near Veterans Day, we don't do it on that day, the 3rd grade from Glenwood Avenue, 1 mile away, walk to the wall and then walk back and get an education. And I've met those kids over the years as they graduated. But we do live sessions at the thing. And what I tell them, if they want to read history books, read biographies and autobiographies. That's history.
Good point.
Read the over. Don't look at a chart like that and read it and say, "Oh, I know all about the war."
Yeah. One of the things I was going to do if there was a more of a mixed crowd was going to start off and ask a question. The question's very simple. I want to hear your initial response when I say 2 words: Vietnam War. And the responses I've gotten have been actually amazing. I mean, and it goes back to what you said, Bill, about education. I was supposed to speak 2 years ago at Ocean City High School, and had ordered books, and was just on Welcome Home. Had ordered books and getting ready to go. I was in Ohio at my grandson's confirmation. I had driven back just to do the 3 days of talking. He called me the night before and said, "Oh, Ken, by the way, I'm sorry, we decided not to do it. We don't want them to hear about the war." What? And I went, "What?" Yeah. I said, "They have to hear about the war so this doesn't happen again." Right. I said, it was the biggest waste of life and the biggest waste of a lot of guys' times, mentally and physically. I said, but they have to know about that so they can try to keep it in abeyance and not worry about it. But they didn't do it.
Well, they should talk to the 5 history teachers who are high. They would convince them that they should be talking about it.
Well, I you know what? If I would have known that, I would have had them call. Because not only did the kids lose the perspective, they had no idea what Vietnam War was or is. And yes, Peggy.
That brings a great point of one of the reasons why what motivated me to enlarge a picture of my dad when he came home from Vietnam for the first time in his uniform at the Philadelphia airport. And it would be the first day that he would meet me, because my mom and dad, they married before he left.
How old were you?
I was almost 2.
Okay.
My mom, just a small little family all greeting him, waiting for him at the airport. And my aunt took the picture, and my aunt gave me the picture, and she told me the story of the picture. That as he was walking towards us, they were spitting on him.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, my dad, he didn't care. He just kept forward.
You're home.
He saw his family, and that's all that mattered. But my aunt, she captured that moment in time, And the reason I enlarged it is because my nephew, I showed him the picture, I told him the story, and he says, why were they spitting on him? So my nephew, he's, in high school,
Yep.
and that just blew my mind. And that's why I tell that story and I try to educate about that, because yes, it just seems like the younger generation
They have no,
losing it.
no,
They're
they have
losing it.
no
Yeah.
concept at all. Yeah, a thing also about when I told you the funny thing about the twin brother coming back with Ban the Bond and all this. We were on the plane. We were flying from Fort Lewis to Philadelphia, and I'm befriended a Spec 5 E5 buck sergeant. And we were talking. He'd been in Vietnam 18 months, had a lot of combat. And he says, oh man, I'm so excited to get home. He says, I can't wait. This is going to be fantastic. So I said, well, I hope you have a great life. Enjoy it. So we get up. As we get up to get out, this stewardess came up to him and gave him a note. And he looked at it and he stopped, and everybody was stopping behind him. And I said, what's the matter? He says, look at this. And it says, Dear John, Mom and I are busy. Why don't you take a cab home? And I looked at it, I said, oh my God. I said, that is horrible. He goes, I don't know what to do. He says, I think I'll just go to the bar and wait a little bit then to get a cab. Then when I came out, it was my father-in-law, my mother-in-law, and my wife, and my 2-year-old son.
That wasn't a fictitious note. That was really.
The stewardess she came up to him. She said he was a E5. He has a name tag on, and she walked up and she said, "Here, this is for you." And he read it, and he's like I said, he stopped in the aisle, and he was like, I said, "What's the matter?" I said, "We'll give you a ride home," because he lived in the Northeast and we lived in Delaware County, and he goes, "No, don't bother." He said, "I'm just going to go to the bar and drink it off." Yeah. But yeah, it's true. Yeah.
About the kids, it was really interesting, the last discussion that we had here, there was about 7 young school kids that were here because their teachers starting to tell them about the Vietnam War, and though it's not part of the curriculum, and they came to they didn't even know there was a discussion going to be. They just came here to visit the museum, and they actually stayed for the discussion.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
That's great. I did a talk up at Valley Forge Military Academy about 2 months ago. I also went to a military high school. So just to let you know, you still got to stop drinking in the middle of the day. And I went to a military high school, and I was really into all this stuff with the military. I was going to go to West Point, and then thank God decided not to. But they just have no grasp, the kids today, of what, and I'll say this, and you may think it's hokey, duty, honor, and country.
Right.
And you know, I look at them and I say, do you understand what that means? You know, and at Valley Forge, I had to explain it to them because, yeah, I mean, they were mostly freshmen and some sophomores and a couple of juniors. There were like 35 people there. But the teacher who had me do it, she was a pistol, and I said to them, "Look, guys, you can ask any questions you want." And they were, well, women too. They were both now. And I said, "Ask your questions." Well, they started asking questions. Then this one kid is in front. He says to me, he says, "Sir," I said, "Yeah, what can I do for you?" He goes, "How many gooks did you kill?" So I
You
looked.
get that from second grade.
Yeah, I looked and I go, "Well, first of all, we don't call them that, okay? They're Vietnamese. Second of all," I said, "it doesn't matter how many I killed. It's my service that I did with my brothers. That's all. And by the way, 0, okay? Just to let you know." But, I mean, they had not a clue and a concept of what we did. Not a clue. Bill.
I think that's where, of course, in my case, a little different because I spent 18 years on the school board, so I knew the people I could prep them, and then they prep the kids prepping the kids before they get in front of a veteran is really important, I think. To lay out some groundwork. But the other way, the other thing that happened in Wildwood High School, the very first Wall of Fame recipient, and the kids see it every day when they go to the gym, was a lieutenant in the Marine Corps who died, was a graduate. And he's the very first inductee in the Wall of Fame. So
That's
they
great.
see that with his picture and bio.
Yeah, that's super. And you were right. The teacher had prepped the kids what not to ask.
Yeah.
This kid.
What to ask?
Oh yeah. This kid just wanted to be a smart aleck and ask the question he wasn't supposed to. Because she jumped up and she said, whatever his name was, Fred, I told you not to ask that question of a veteran. And everybody, and all the other guys are getting, we're going to hear about this.
I'll tell you a funny thing. I was speaking in North Wildwood, and it's the first time it came to my mind. When I did it, they asked what was the best medal you got, and there was about eight of us up there. So when it came to me, I said, well, it's the good conduct medal. And I explained it because I said, I don't know a single Marine that deserves a good conduct medal. We got lucky. We got covered before something happened. None of us made 3 years without a problem.
That's a good point. I never thought about it that way.
They want to hear again. They want to go into the killing and
Yep.
destruction, and you take them right away from that.
And then in the second book, I get into what I told you about the guy being shot down and the mutilation of the bodies and all this. I didn't even know about that. It was with the pilot Rex telling me. He says, Ken, this is why we were there to get Bud and get the observer out. He said, because if they didn't, they would be mutilated and killed. And I said, good point. He said, but that's something they need to know. Because did you ever see it in the press? Did North Vietnamese VC mutilate bodies, American down pilots? I never did. So, I mean, that's things that they need to understand. And it's not easy, but true. No doubt about that. But they have to understand it. But they don't. Okay,
I have
go
a
ahead.
question for
Yes.
Freddie. Do you know what school that the young men were coming from?
Near Glassboro.
Okay. Okay.
Well, first of all, I want to thank you for sitting there and being patient and listening and, having some good questions. I think that's important. But most importantly, the reason why I wrote both of these books is because we, as brothers in Vietnam, deserve to be recognized for the service that we did. And unfortunately, it's coming around, but it took a long time for that to come around.
Mm-hmm.
Second, these 8 men, average age 24, there are 58,281 on the wall. They're not any exceptional to any of those. Everybody that's on that wall deserves the recognition for the heroism, for the bravery, for any other, for the valor they had, but most importantly, they can't be forgotten. And I think we as veterans, we're the ones who have to prolong that, take it into perpetuity if we can, because they really can't be forgotten. Because they are the ones, unfortunately again, who paid in full. But I just want to let you know that with the widows that I talk to and the daughter, the only thing they want to hear from me is that their fathers or their husbands will not be forgotten. And I said, guarantee it. Yeah, Bill.
If you're done,
Yeah.
we just dedicated the Gold Star Family Monument in North Wildwood in May.
Yep.
And the keynote speaker was that situation. Her father had died in Vietnam in a plane crash. And she was 4 years old, so she has absolutely no memory of him. They saw each other, but a 1, 2, and 3-year-old has no memory of an adult. She was the keynote speaker, and she.
Yeah, we had a guy who was World War II vet. The guy was absolutely amazing. He was about 103. Funny, I don't remember his name. I apologize. But you were talking about the girl, and I'm losing my train of thought. Getting old is great, isn't it? I can't remember. Don't worry about it. Not important. But it's just something that we have to continue to reiterate and continue to bring up because they've got to know about it. You know, I have a grandson who's 28. He couldn't go in the service. He wanted to because he botched his back up when he was working one time. And I have a grandson who's 16. I don't want to see them go to Vietnam. I want to see them if they wanted to be in the service to serve the country, but not to go to Vietnam. They need to understand why that occurred. So they're not doing that. They're making the right decision, the right choice. Any other questions? Again, thank you for your attendance and for your listening. And if anybody wants to buy a book, they're for sale up there. If not, I really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ken.
No problem.
Ken.